Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, my dear audience, viewers. Welcome to the Happy Strong Family podcast again. Thank you so much for being with us. Today, I'm excited to have Sister Marwa from Naseeha Helpline to be a guest in our podcast today. Alhamdulillah, it's a great opportunity for us to host her. So today is about Naseeha Helpline and their programs and services and their contribution to the community. Welcome, Sister Marwa.
Jazakallah khairan. I appreciate the introduction, and I'm really excited to be here with you too.
Thank you. By the way, we are hosting our podcast at Masjid Darul Iman. Alhamdulillah, it's a great support from the Masjid for continuing this podcast. I would like to thank the Masjid management for giving us the opportunity. All right, so let's begin. So, where to start, Sister Marwa? Tell us some of your stories.
About being on the helpline, or
Yeah, it's just anything you want to share with the audience.
Sure. So I guess first what I'll share is, so I joined Naseeha Mental Health in 2018 as a volunteer. So I did, outreach and just raising awareness about the organization and what we do. And then from there, I transitioned into a volunteer on the helpline, so a peer support counselor. And then I transitioned into my role now, which is more program facilitator, facilitating and developing content for workshops and so on. So yeah, I'm really excited to be here to speak on behalf of Naseeha and to share more information about the work that we do and, how people can also sort of seek support. I'll kind of jump into what we do. So we are a helpline. That's definitely a service that we provide. I think if I was to think about, what needs do we fulfill in the organization for the community, it really is trying to fulfill the needs of mental health from an Islam-inspired sort of perspective. It's culturally, sensitive, and just like using that faith-based approach. I think that sometimes there's some gaps when we're talking about mental health and addressing those sort of concerns and the Muslim community. So alhamdulillah, our organization really is able to bridge that gap.
Right. That's great. So how do you see that that gaps are being fulfilled, like in terms of the perceptions of the program services? How do you see the Muslim audience or our community really, perceives the offerings and some of the gaps that you are willing to fulfill, and how these are received by the Muslim community?
I think there's a couple of different parts to that sort of question. So I think on one hand, when we're talking about mental health, I think that, perhaps like the more macro global sort of perspective is there's still a stigma, unfortunately, that comes with mental health, right? There's sometimes shame and, a bit of a taboo sort of subject to talk about. And I find that particularly within our Muslim community, that's also something that's very true. However, what I will also say is that, alhamdulillah, I think we are in a time where there's movement and we are breaking that stigma as, a society and as a community. So I think that our community is definitely becoming a lot more receptive to, understanding what mental health is. And, I guess since we're talking about it, I'll just kind of make that distinction, really understanding that it's not just about, while some people may have a mental health disorder, what we're really trying to help people understand is to normalize that people do experience that the same way that we may have like a physical health, condition. But also when we're talking about mental health, it really is, our overall sort of mental state of well-being that impacts how we work, how we function, how we learn, how we become, how we engage with others and how well we can really contribute to society. So it's something that impacts us all. And I think that our community is really, breaking that sort of stigma and understanding, having a better understanding of what mental health is. So they are receptive to our services. And I think even, the time that we're living in right now, especially unfortunately, everything that's happening in Palestine, the genocide and, the suffering that's happening around the world, we've experienced a huge uptick in the number of calls and people seeking support. I think as a community, we're grieving and we are really starting to turn inward and turn toward each other, from a community sort of approach. to support each other and to just kind of seek services.
Right, right. No, no, that's very important. Thanks for bringing it up. So my actually, I'm thinking from the perspective of mental health and well-being, and also mental sickness, like the taboo you just referred. That some people still, if you are referring to mental health, they think, oh, she's a mentally sick person. So am I sick person? Am I? Because no, I'm not. So could you please like elaborate a little bit more on what do you really mean by mental health and well-being, and how you differentiate it from mental sickness, and how you also correlate this mental health and well-being with emotional health and well-being? Well, is there any distinction between these two?
So, I mean, when we're talking about mental health and well-being, I would say, first of all, I would say that it's connected to everything is so interconnected. Like our mental health is intrinsically linked to our emotional health. It's linked to our spiritual health. It's linked to our physical health. If we're not doing well, on a mental, emotional sort of level, that has an impact on our physical health. And then vice versa. If physically we're not, doing well, that can also impact our mental health. So I think that when we're looking at things from a holistic perspective, everything impacts, everything. So there's definitely an emotional, sort of aspect that's there. So for example, how do I regulate my emotions when I'm angry, when I'm in distress, when I'm grieving, when I'm sad, and so on. So there's that sort of emotional component that's there. If we're looking at things like, what are the things that I say to myself? What are the thoughts that I say to myself when something happens? If I have an interaction with someone, or perhaps, it could even be like the things that we say to ourselves. I don't know. I spill my coffee, and maybe I'm so critical of myself, and I don't know, I call myself stupid because I spilled my coffee. But I notice that there's like a particularly harsh way that I'm speaking to myself, and maybe that's a pattern that exists in all of my sort of interactions, or in a lot of my interactions. With respect to distinguishing between the difference. So there is a difference between someone having, let's say, a diagnosed or an undiagnosed, mental health disorder. So let's say schizophrenia, versus when we're talking about mental health, our state of well-being overall, right? So, and we know that everything impacts it. So for example, if I'm not getting enough sleep, if I'm not getting fresh air, if I am, if I don't have meaningful social connections with other people, if there's a lot of active stressors in my life, like subhanAllah, we all have our trials and, tests in this life. So perhaps there's a lot of things that are going on. Even right now, again, we are all, witnessing and experiencing a genocide in, real time. So, what is the impact of, witnessing all of that on our mental health? Of course, it's going to affect us. So that's kind of like the overall sort of thing. How are we balancing? How are we taking care of our mental, emotional, spiritual health, physical health as well, versus having a diagnosed, like let's say disorder, or undiagnosed, but something that's specific.
Right, right. No, that's very important. Thank you very much for clarifying that. So, um, yeah, that's very important. Actually, as you mentioned, that because of the global situations, genocide, and other phenomena happening, really, we go through a lot of emotional um, uh, up and down, right? So, can you share some of the strategies, how our audience can maybe follow those strategies to cope up with those challenges, or maybe to improve their mental health and well-being? So, is there some strategies, some tools that you might like to share with our audience?
Sure. I mean, I think on, the first one that I'll say is you can call our helpline. So, you can definitely call our helpline. Actually, we just transitioned into, we're finally 24/7. So 24 hours, 7 days a week. Callers can call in. It's free. It's anonymous. It's confidential. They have the opportunity to speak to a trained peer support counselor on the line. And really, not only are they, trained professionals, but mashallah, we have a very dedicated team of staff and volunteers who are very empathetic, very compassionate, non-judgmental. So they can speak to someone, on the helpline. Also, we have a text line. So if someone is not comfortable speaking on the phone, we also have, they can text into the helpline as well and talk to someone that way. I believe currently 25% of our users are using the text line. And inshallah, in the future, what we're also sort of working on right now in terms of like future goals is a feature where people can, not everybody has a phone, right? So our goal really is, how do we make it accessible? How do we, again, fulfill that sort of gap that's in our community when it comes to mental health and spiritual well-being. So our next sort of goal is having like a web chat sort of feature on our website for people that don't have access to, a device like their phone, so they can talk to a peer support counselor that way. So that's, one aspect in terms of seeking support. So having, a supportive person that will listen to you, come from a place of compassion and understanding and validation, and, try to just carry your burden with you, like help support you and make space for you. So that's one way that someone can seek support. Another way is, I'm trying to think about like the practical sort of strategies that we can talk about, as well as like what Naseeha offers. So, when we're talking about other sort of resources that Naseeha offers, there's workshops that we deliver. So far we've had over 100 workshops that we have delivered. So this is through our psychoeducation program.
Inshallah.
It's been, mashallah, I actually think the program's amazing. It was developed in 2015, around 2015. And I think, when we're talking also about the history of the organization and how it developed, there was so many different events that kind of happened that forced our organization, in a sense, to really adapt and to grow. So, for example, we had the tragic incidences like with the London family, the Quebec City, terrorism shooting that happened. There's so many different, unfortunate, events that happen in our community where a lot of people did turn to the helpline. And again, like the calls just kind of skyrocketed, and it really forced us to increase, the services that we provide or the hours that we provide. So when we're talking about even workshops, like mashallah, like providing support for, MSA students, in colleges and universities, providing, delivering different workshops to educators on how do we support, Muslim students during Ramadan, for example, or during, the current political climate where there's so much suffering and so much grieving and pain. So we've been working with, Toronto District School Board, York Region District School Board. We have different partnerships with Islamic schools delivering these workshops as well. And, through these workshops, we're also providing, not just like resources, but like coping strategies and tools for students as well. So we also we'll talk about mental health, for example. And so it really is catered to the age group that we're working with. So, I can speak from my personal experience of, perhaps one workshop is like, anti-bullying for kindergarten students or for, the younger elementary students. And then perhaps we're working with teenagers on, having like facilitating an affinity space for Muslim identifying students in public schools to be able to have a safe space to talk about what's going on around the world. To having, workshops for the elderly about, elder abuse or about, taking care of their mental health. So I think even, through the services that we provide with these sort of like workshops, a lot of strategies are shared and a lot of like psychoeducational, learning is happening. With respect to, I think you had asked me like, what can our viewers sort of do? I think anything that helps us, cope. Of course, we know that, when we are listening or reciting to the Quran, there's like the spiritual sort of aspect, like taking care of ourselves in that sense, putting our trust in Allah and recognizing that things are not in our control. It's actually very humbling to remember. I think sometimes we forget and we kind of, our anxiety tends to increase when we feel like things are not in our control. And we want to be able to, explore that, but also understand that, subhanAllah, it's a reminder from Allah that everything happens the way that He wants it to happen. And ultimately, we really aren't in control of that. And then we really want to work on kind of like touching back to some of the things that I said a little bit earlier. Are we, integrating movement in our daily life? Are we, feeding ourselves, good nutritious meals? Are we getting, fresh air and sunlight? So incorporating a lot of like the basic sort of building blocks to supporting positive mental health and social connection, like meaningful social connection. We know that plays a huge role when it comes to positive treatment outcomes as well. So whether it's, our friendship circles or, at the masjid, like our community, feeling like we are a part of a community, and, just nurturing those relationships. And I think even having supports available, whether it's Naseeha or a therapist or family, friends, whatever that looks like. So having a supportive network as well, all of those pieces work together to support positive mental health.
Wonderful. No, that's great. That's amazing to learn about the activities that we are doing and the wide range of topics that you are covering through your workshop. It's amazing. MashaAllah, tabarakallah. So,
Is it possible I could interrupt with just a question?
Of course.
yes.
So yes, you were mentioning sort of the education piece of it and building the awareness, and you mentioned masjids. And we're sitting here in a masjid, and one of our hosts is the director of the masjid here, Brother Mushtaq. He's not hosting today. Jazakallah khair to Brother Kassar, who's filling in on very last minute and his first time hosting, mashallah. So Jazakallah khair, may Allah reward all his efforts. He's also the founder of Happy Strong Family, so mashallah.
Amen.
So, and I like to, when Brother Mushtaq is here, especially because he's a director and he can influence change, just for the purposes of improving and being better, I like to sometimes call out masjids. And so I'm wondering, when it comes to mental health, I know, alhamdulillah, there's a lot of work. I see a lot of programs at masjids, but do you still feel there's a gap? And based on what is it that the masjids and the organizations, Islamic organizations, can sort of do to step up and help facilitate some of the needs of the community?
Yeah, and I think that that's an excellent question. And, I appreciate the pressure that you're putting on some of our organizations and leaders. I guess what I would say is when we're talking about, alhamdulillah, again, I think that we really are making progress when it comes to breaking the stigma when it comes to mental health. I think that there is still misconceptions in terms of, why are you experiencing anxiety, or why are you experiencing symptoms of depression? Just go read the Quran and you'll be fine. So that sort of mindset, I think that sometimes it's still a little bit hard for people to understand that, it's something that a lot of people struggle with. And it's very normal. It's like we want to think of mental health as like a spectrum, so we're going to fluctuate. There will be movement, and that is normal. So I think, one of those gaps or misconceptions is just trying to better understand, mental health, and that it's not just as, simple as, okay, well, you can go pray and, or read Quran and that will alleviate everything. Of course, we know that helps. That's one of the things that is, a strategy, and it's a tool, and Allah has given it to us as a gift, right? To cleanse our hearts and so on as well. But it's not the only thing. And, sometimes someone may require, let's say, medication, or someone may require more supports as well. Or if, for example, if we're raised in an environment where it is, or maybe we're in a relationship, a marriage, or whatever, like parent or partner, where it is abusive, there is physical assault that's taking place, there is sexual violence that's taking place, there's neglect. We have children, unfortunately, that a lot of taboo things, I would say too, we have children that are experiencing neglect and physical abuse, but they're also experiencing sexual abuse at the hands of family members. So I think that, what I would sort of urge leaders in masajid and in our communities is to understand that, alhamdulillah, our community is great, but we're all human beings at the end of the day. And the things that impact society on a sort of global scale also impact the Muslim community. We are not immune to it. Even if we have our faith, we are not immune to experiencing anxiety and depression and grief. We're not immune to domestic violence. We're not immune to situations where there's incest taking place. And I think that being able to have these conversations, and to be able to discuss them more openly, as well as to provide, support for people that are struggling with these sort of, difficulties. It's something that we need to work on. And, Naseeha really is, it really has, I think, become a frontline sort of service for a lot of people to turn toward when there is tragedy, something happens in the community. Sometimes, even imams, they're not sure really how to deal with it when it comes to mental health. And actually, some of our programs, we also offer training to imams. How do you deal with, a family that comes and says that their son or daughter is suicidal? So mashallah, the work that the imams do, they're very knowledgeable, of course, and, they're very respected. But, we also want to be able to train them so they have, kind of integrates this mental health perspective and understanding so that they're better able to support their community members as well. So we did work with, some imams to deliver, that program, so that they have the skills to intervene when someone is struggling with suicidality or self-harm and so on. And I think, just continuing these sort of initiatives would be great.
Wonderful. No, that's great advice. Thank you very much for sharing that. So I'd like to come back to put focus on, say, internal mechanism, strategy, where individuals can cope with some mental stress, anxiety. So I heard that a lot of a mix of internal mechanism and also external mechanism in terms of to uh, how to cope with mental issues. So I'd like to know, like, from individual perspective as a person, whether it's a man or woman. I know there there could be different factors based on age group and gender. So as a generic principle, could you share some of the internal mechanism as a strategy or principle or guidelines an individual can apply to number one, resolve their mental stress or anxiety or depression, etc., and second, how to improve that, how to enhance their positivity and outlook to life, and so that he can become or she can become a more enlightened, more contributing to the to herself or himself, and also more contributing to the community as a whole.
Thank you for the question. I guess, one of the biggest things that I'll say, from my sort of perspective as a clinician, is that what we really want to do is to be able to increase our ability to self-reflect. I think if we're able to increase our ability to self-reflect, then, it sort of gives us the tools to be able to, take that further and to make change and so on. So if we increase our awareness and, our sense of self-awareness, and then we're able to have better insights into what's happening in our life. Maybe we're able to notice certain patterns, whether it's the relationships that we get into, the types of jobs that we, kind of take on. Maybe there's like a certain pattern when it comes to conflict that keeps coming up. So, we want to be able to recognize what are the patterns. What are the ways in which, I am helping myself? What are the ways in which I am making progress? And, what are my strengths and so on? And what are the ways in which maybe I'm holding myself back, or the ways in which, perhaps like I don't know, engaging in self-sabotaging sort of behaviors. So I think that without this ability to self-reflect, it's very challenging to be able to do that. So I kind of go back to that as a basis, like, self-reflection. And subhanAllah, it's mentioned throughout the Quran too, for us to ponder and to reflect and to think. So I think that plays a huge role. The other part of it is, you don't necessarily need a therapist in your life to be able to get through the things that we kind of get through. However, what I will say is that having a professional, especially if we're talking about very serious issues, right, like suicidality and self-harm and trauma and so on, we should seek professional support. If we're struggling to function day to day, we're really struggling to get through the day, we want to be able to, again, have this insight that, okay, I'm really struggling. I need to reach out for support. So there are things that we can do, on our own. And then there are also things that we need to be able to recognize, like, hey, I need to go seek support for this from a professional. Even outside of, more complex sort of issues, I think, working with a professional, whether it's a peer support counselor, with Naseeha. Part of our work, by the way, which I inshallah will get a chance to speak about, is also the web therapy program, where we pair, callers with clinicians in the community as well. So whether it's, speaking to a peer counselor or speaking to a clinician or whichever sort of professional, we need to be able to reach out for that help. And they can also, provide us with the support and the tools and the resources, and like just kind of be able to shift our lens, like understand, first of all, there's that self-awareness and understanding how what is my lens in the world? What colored this lens? Because we all see the world differently based on our experiences. So we want to get a better understanding of this lens that we view the world, with, and understand the sort of like deeper rooted issues that are there that kind of contribute to that, and how they impact, where we're at in life today. So it's, so there's, I guess, like a mix of things that we can do on our own, and then also with the help of a professional, or even like, learning on our own, like self-directed learning as well. So this idea of like just having a growth mindset and, and continuous learning in this journey of life. And then there's other, I think, again, we talked about the more practical strategies of how do we get out of our head and into our body when we go out for a walk, when we engage in exercise, movement, when we take care of our needs, right? Like really tuning into our body to be able to recognize, I'm sleep deprived, I'm hungry, I am stressed out, I'm noticing tension and anxiety in my body. So all of those sort of aspects. And, again, I think that it's something that you can do on your own, definitely. And you can try to coach yourself through when we're talking about certain, just like promoting positive mental health and well-being. And then there are certain things that, a professional can really help us with. And there's certain points where we actually need a professional to help us with, because it's not just something that we can manage on our own.
Wonderful, greatly explained. Thank you so much, Sister Marwa. So, yeah, it gives me kind of a perspective of really how an individual can take some kind of strategy to improve himself or herself, and of course to seek help from Naseeha Helpline. So, again, just to put my question in context, like I see most of the people, or majority of the people, don't have, or a better time is lack like positivity in terms of like uh, contributing to community work. They are more into his or her own world and struggling with his or her own life, correct? So, and I hear most of the time community members just complain. They love to complain, like life is so hard and all this. I really rarely see those positivity and enlightenment and that mindset, right? So my question is basically, I'm just thinking from the perspective of everyday scenario, like how a person can become more uh, positive in terms of his or her mindset, and how to contribute to the family or society, community at large, not only just within his or her own world. Number one. Number two, there's a question number two. So how he or she may find or may consider or assess him or her that he's in a point to reach out to a mental support worker or a psychotherapist, how he or she can understand that, okay, now I'm at a point where I should reach out.
Mhm.
So that's again self-assessment questions. He even doesn't know that he needs help, right? So maybe there are some indicators or factors that might help him or to understand now it's a point to reach out to Naseeha Helpline, right? So so that's, I think that's I want to know, like how to understand that, how from moving forward, how to proceed from those points of understanding. Yeah.
So I think, to go to your first question about what I understood from that is like, how do we develop a more positive outlook on life and kind of contribute to society or a community in a more positive way, and kind of like broaden our perspective, right?
Correct.
And I think that there's a few things that are there. So, for example, if someone is working with, a mental health professional, let's say they're working with a clinician, and they're able to identify that, I really struggle with cognitive distortions. So I really struggle with, certain irrational thoughts that we all experience, right? So maybe it's like all or nothing thinking. Maybe as soon as something happens, our mind goes to the worst case possible scenario, and it becomes a pattern, for example, right? So, whether it's on your own through your own learning, or, with the support of a professional, perhaps we're able to identify the patterns that we sort of engage in, or like the thought patterns that we engage in, like this worst case scenario thinking, or catastrophizing every sort of situation. And, there's so many different approaches to therapy. So every clinician will work with, a client in a different way. But one of those ways is, like they'll try to explore, well, past sort of experiences, and like where how far they can kind of like track where that pattern sort of started. And there's usually subhanAllah, there's a lot of connections between what we experience, especially in our earlier sort of childhood, and where things are at, how we're at, or like the space that we're in today. So they're able to kind of help you make connections in that sense. And we know from a scientific, perspective that we are able to rewire our brain. So even if we have this sort of pattern of, catastrophizing for whatever reason, we developed it maybe as a coping mechanism. Maybe it kind of kept us safe when we were younger, right? Like, I'll give you an example. Like, maybe we grew up in an environment where it was, there wasn't much stability, and we don't know what to expect. Mm-hmm. So in order to keep ourselves safe, we always had to be critical of everything. We had to, think about all the ways in which things could go wrong so that we could feel prepared for it. Mm-hmm. In the long run, though, maybe that doesn't serve us anymore. Maybe now it creates more problems because anything that happens, our mind automatically goes to those worst case scenario thinking or thoughts. So we know that from a scientific perspective, if we can reframe our thoughts, we create, different, neural pathways that will kind of become like the path, like well traveled upon in a sense. And so you really are like redirecting and reframing your thoughts, which, with time and with practice and consistency, there will be that change and that shift. So I think that kind of maybe speaks to a little bit about what you're talking in terms of how do we shift our perspective. The other thing is, I think when we're struggling with something, it's very easy to get like into tunnel vision. And what we want to do is we want to broaden our perspective, right? Like look at things from the bigger picture. So even like a practical sort of strategy to do that could be like, I think really connecting with nature. And again, subhanAllah, it's in the Quran a lot as well. Going on hikes and, going just to be able to really take in like the beauty of the world as well. Or even if we think about, Earth as a planet and space as a solar system, and we're this tiny little speck, like I think that helps us broaden our perspective. So those are maybe like a little bit of the more practical things. But what I will also say is, I think when we're struggling and we're going through things, one of the biggest things that we need is to have someone that can validate our pain, that can listen to us, that can offer compassion and hold space. And, I think I mentioned this earlier, just help alleviate the burden or carry our burden a little bit with us. And I think that, there's so much power to that. And sometimes we underestimate the power of having a compassionate, safe, non-judgmental person that we can talk with, or that can even just sit with us. And sometimes we also have callers on the helpline that they don't really want to talk. They just want to be on the helpline. And to them, that is support as well. So I think just, having someone that can, hold space for you can carry so much weight. So, I think that that's also a crucial sort of element, having a validating sort of presence, which alhamdulillah, we're able to provide on the helpline. The other, I'm so sorry, I'm trying to remember your second question, which was
self-assessment. Like when a person can understand, now this is the point I should reach out to a mental health support person.
Yeah. And I think if we go back to tuning into our body, if we're, recognizing that, oh my goodness, I'm feeling really, tense and stressed in my body. I'm, maybe I'm even developing, like we know that, again, our mental health is connected to our physical health. Maybe we're developing physical, health conditions, which, I think right now what they're saying is that women are more likely to develop autoimmune, diseases because of the impact of mental health on their physical health as well. So I think if we're able to tune into our body and notice, whether severe lack of appetite or, severe weight gain or, perhaps like, a lot of migraines, like a lot of, there's like a lot of physical manifestations to it as well. If we're noticing that, perhaps something happens in life that on a scale of 1 to 10, objectively, maybe we would rate it as like a 2 out of 10 in terms of struggle. But maybe we're noticing that, the way that we react to that, there's an overreaction to it, perhaps, or perhaps we're overreacting to it more than we, would have in the past. Those are sort of like maybe clues that, hey, there's something going on. I'm having a hard time regulating my, my emotions, or I'm having a hard time, staying grounded. So those are some of the cues that can kind of indicate to us that, we should go speak to a professional. If we're having suicidal thoughts, again, our Muslim community is not immune to any of these issues. So if we're experiencing suicidal ideation, if we're hurting ourselves, if we find ourselves, even if we find ourselves greatly like resentful in life and unhappy and not satisfied, we can't focus. Like, I think a lot of those there's so many symptoms that could be an indicator that, hey, like, I should really talk to someone about this. It doesn't have to be that hard. I can feel supported. And what I want to talk about as well is, to mention, so Naseeha has the helpline that I mentioned. You can speak to someone, you can text. Inshallah, in the future, there will be a web chat sort of option where you can speak to someone on the website. We also have a web therapy program, and we're looking to also expand that further. So the web therapy program is free short-term therapy to clients, where we pair them up with clinicians that offer that service to them. And what we're hoping to sort of what we're working on right now is growing that service where it could be a paid model, or for those people that also have insurance as well. And then that will also help offset some of our costs so that we can continue to provide free therapy and make it accessible to people that can't afford it. So there's also the web therapy program, in addition to, I mentioned the psychoeducational workshops that we have been conducting as well. And then the fourth sort of component of what Naseeha does is we have a critical response team. So when there are critical incidences that happen, earlier I referenced, the terrorist shooting in Quebec City or the London terror attack. Our organization is able to sort of like deploy a critical response team that offers support to the community to help them with their grieving, to connect them to clinicians or have somebody to talk to, and so on. So really, Naseeha is more than just a helpline. We're able to provide, so many different services to the community, and we want the community to know that these services exist. And most of the things that we're offering are free. Some of the workshops are paid, just to offset some of our costs as well. But we have the helpline that's free. We have the web therapy, which is free. Plus, there will be the paid component for those people that can afford it. And then there's the critical incidences, which again is also a free service.
Wonderful. No, that's great. Great to learn these programs and services. So now I'm thinking through your answers. Actually, another question just popped up in my mind. So in terms of mental health and well-being, right? Uh, so most of the cases, person who is suffering from this mental anxiety or who needs this support, he or she might not understand or maybe make decisions that, okay, I'm going to go to mental health support organizations or whatever. So in that case, maybe his or her family members, maybe parents or big brother, big sister, whoever, who is like closely, observing that individual. So my question is basically, what are the symptoms that the family member should notice in in that particular person to understand, hey, this person now needs mental health support? And second is like how to really, with love and care and without any push or without any force, uh, family members can or maybe like encourage or convince that individual to agree that, okay, now I can go to the mental health support. Sometimes that person is not willing or not agreeing, right?
Mhm.
So how to facilitate that whole motivation or inspiration in terms of observation of the individual, the symptoms, and understanding how to motivate, how to inspire with love and care. Because most of the cases, there are some tensions between family members.
Mhm.
Most of the cases, the person has issues with, now say, parents are like a teenagers or youth, they
Mhm.
have tensions. Now parents, they want the best of their
Mhm.
kids, right? But youth, they don't want any advice, especially when it is comes to like a mental health support. Like, hey, do you think I'm crazy? I'm not gonna go. That kind of thing. So from the parenting model as well, so there are many elements to that. Just so I don't want to go into details all of this, but maybe we could focus on this generic like strategy, how we can motivate, inspire with love, care, without judgment, so that the person agrees to go to a mental health support source organization like Naseeha.
Okay, thank you. And I appreciate the question. I think it's a great question. I think there's a few things that are there. I think the first thing that I'll say is that my, suggestion would be we start with ourselves. So if we take care of our mental health, if we take care of ourselves, if we attend to what our needs are, right, then we are in a better space to be able to take care of other people. So if we are struggling with work stress and family stress, and as a community we're grieving everything, all the atrocities that are happening around the world, and if we're not taking care of ourselves, we cannot take care of other people. It's like that sort of analogy that they give you when you're on the airplane, and God forbid, if there's an emergency, you have to put the oxygen mask first on yourself, even if you have a child with you, because if something was to happen to you, you can't help the other person. So I think we have to start with ourselves and focus on working on ourselves first, making sure that, we learn about mental health, that we learn how to take care of ourselves, and that we model that to our family members, our loved ones, and so on. If we learn how to communicate more effectively, if we learn how to, resolve conflict more effectively, if we learn more about ourselves and like our different styles and, what our needs are, what our boundaries are, the more that we're able to work on ourselves, then the more we're able to also model that with our family. I think sometimes it can be a little bit challenging for families when we don't talk. We don't talk to our family members. We don't talk to our youth. It's taboo to talk about certain things. So then we also aren't really able to have, honest, open conversations. And then, God forbid, someone in the family goes through something that's really challenging. And then all of a sudden it's like, hey, you need to go get support. But there was no, really nurturing that relationship where there's open communication. So I think, we want to be able to openly discuss things like mental health with our kids. We want to be able to check in, with our partner, with our children, with our friends. And, I think that there's so much power to just normalizing it through discussion and conversation. Even, letting your children know, like, yeah, like mommy's having, a rough day today. I need to, take it slow, or I need to do this. I need to really, get this workout in, because I know that that's going to make me feel better. So I think even like modeling it to our young children in that sense as well. And then, I think by extension, then there's that sort of ripple effect in our family, right? The other, sort of thing that I'll say is that unfortunately, we can't force people to change. We can't force them to accept help if they're not ready to accept help. And sometimes maybe, they're not ready to go to, their family members or their friends for support out of fear of judgment, out of fear of shame, perhaps, right? Like it's such a complicated topic sometimes. Maybe they do feel better to talk to someone, anonymously, confidentially, because they're worried about disappointing their family member. So I think, having services like Naseeha and other organizations that can kind of, be there for them in that sense. Also, I will respectfully kind of like disagree with something in terms of, I actually think our young people are more receptive to, getting care for mental health and talking about it than perhaps some of the older generation. So I do think that the younger generation is more receptive. And sometimes actually what happens is they are trying to access supports, and, their parents or grandparents or whoever in the family is actually blocking that. And perhaps that's because there's still a lack of understanding, and there's the fear of judgment. Our community has a huge fear of judgment.
I agree.
What will people say if they find out you are speaking to a therapist, or that you are calling Naseeha, or that you're struggling with your mental health, or that, God forbid, someone was sexually, assaulted? There's a huge fear of judgment and shame, and then it just isolates us and it makes us shut down. So, I think, again, like having these conversations and modeling those, modeling the work, and then I think that that's how we start to, change the narrative and encourage people to seek support.
Wonderful. No, greatly, nicely explained. Thank you so much for bringing up the different elements to the discussion. Sorry, brother. Do you have any
Well,
questions?
we have some questions from the audience, and then we
Okay.
also have, as you were talking, I was also sharing the website for Naseeha Mental Health. So I just wanted to give people a heads up that they can contact them at naseeha.org, and info@naseeha.org is the email address. And the Instagram handle is 1866 Naseeha, which I believe is also the number for the mental support line,
Yeah.
peer support line. So yes, you can go on their Instagram. We've been displaying a QR code if you want to donate to the organization. Alhamdulillah, we heard about all the great work, the web therapy, the helpline. So I was just wondering, like, what are some of the top call drivers that you see? And there was actually a question here from an audience member. They're asking, is Naseeha only for youth and teens, or is it also for adults? So maybe answering both of those questions, and then what are some of the common issues that people are calling in with that we're Naseeha is supporting?
Sure. So first thing that I'll actually mention is for the donations, mashallah, alhamdulillah, we have a great partnership with Islamic Relief where they have agreed to match the donations right now up to $250,000. So if you go through, I believe if you click on Donate Now through Canada, you're taken to the link, the Islamic Relief page. And, for anyone that does want to support our organization, again, like I mentioned, most of the work that we do is for free. And of course, there's a cost that comes to that. We are a registered charity. We are also approved for zakat by the Canadian Council of Imams as well. So we're zakat eligible. You can get a tax receipt. And, like I said, Islamic Relief has, graciously, mashallah, partnered with us and they're matching donations for now. For anyone that does want to support us, financially. And, we do receive some support and funding from the government, but a lot of our funding is actually from the community. So we're here for the community and, we really rely on the community as well. In terms of, the caller's question with regards to, is it only for, youth? So actually, this was one of the misconceptions about Naseeha because initially it was called, I believe, Naseeha Youth Helpline. And then we transitioned into Naseeha Mental Health. So our helpline is open to everybody. You could be a child, you could be, a teen, youth, adult. We have elders that call in as well. Also, it's not just open to Muslims. We really are big on accessibility. So whether you're Muslim or not, of course, our helpline is Islam inspired. And, we really rely on a lot of things from our faith and, like a lot of Islamic values. Kindness and compassion and alleviating the burden from other people and, doing good in this dunya. So there's, that component of it really being Islam inspired in our values. But we accept calls from everyone. You don't have to be Muslim to call in. I promise our peer support counselors will not try to convert you unless that is what you're looking for. But yeah, it really is open to everybody, regardless of age or whatnot. Also, we accept calls. We're toll free in North America, but we accept calls from around the world. We've had callers that call in from Algeria, Germany, Egypt, Palestine. So we really do accept calls worldwide as well. The other, I believe the last question was, the common themes. So we have, I would say, one would be like spirituality. So trying to, really connect with their faith and just kind of struggling, navigating identity. Like a lot of us are raised in the West and, we have, we're kind of exposed to it in that sense. And then we have our cultural, religious sort of values as well. And sometimes it could be challenging to navigate that. So we have a lot of callers that will call in for sort of like spirituality related sort of dilemmas. And, we make it clear to them as well that we're not ulama, but we do actually work with imams that advise us and that we consult with so that we're able to support, our community. Again, there's the mental health aspect and there's that sort of intersection or like integration with spiritual care as well. Another, big sort of theme would be parent and child relationships, kind of like what you were mentioning about, well, what do you do when you're trying to get support for a family member? So that's another, big theme. The other one would be relationships, marital issues. Unfortunately, there's like domestic violence sort of situations as well. And then we have a lot of callers that call in about symptoms of anxiety and symptoms of depression and just trying to, navigate that and get support for that. We also have callers. I think this is also sometimes a misconception that perhaps Naseeha is just like only deals with crisis calls, but that's not the case. Like I said, we really deal with everything, subhanAllah. About 8% of our calls at the moment are crisis calls. And this is like active suicidal ideation and self-harm. And I believe last year we took around 400 calls that were related to that. And alhamdulillah, we were able to de-escalate them. 10 of those calls did require 911 intervention because, of course, at the end of the day, we're trying to save lives and support people. But alhamdulillah, there was, we were able to de-escalate all of those situations. So those are kind of some of the main themes. And I would add that because of everything that's happening around the world right now as well, a lot of our community members are really grieving and hurting, with the genocide, really all around the world, there's so much that's happening. So there's a lot of people seeking, support for that as well.
Jazakallah khair. So we had another question from the audience here asking, mashallah, great topic, much needed to build awareness. How can community members get involved aside from donating money?
Yeah, thank you. That's an excellent question. So outside of the, sort of financial, being a financial donor in some sense, you could also volunteer. So, like I mentioned, I actually joined Naseeha in 2018 as a volunteer. I was attending events just to raise awareness about what we do and just meeting the community and talking about the work that we do. So, we always, we rely on our volunteers a lot. So you can join as a volunteer, whether it's to raise awareness, content creation, marketing, fundraising. We're also really trying to do more research. Like we have access to a lot of, data basically from the helpline about what the Muslim community needs and where the gaps are. So, we're really trying to get more into the sort of research of it so that we can help to continue to bridge those gaps. So for people that are interested in whether the research aspect, if they have a social science or, mental health sort of background, they can also, that would also be beneficial. So as a peer support counselor, they can join us, helping us with our marketing, our fundraising, and so on. And everyone that is employed by Naseeha or is a volunteer, subhanAllah, we all have like different backgrounds. Some of us are clinicians, some of us are doctors, some of us are social workers. Some of us, again, like our background might be, in marketing or fundraising and so on. So we could really use all those different sort of perspectives. And if you're not able to, actually volunteer with us in that sort of way, I think the other thing is just spreading awareness that Naseeha exists. Tell your family members about Naseeha. We do a lot of work in communities where we try to distribute like information and, these little bookmarks for kids so that they have the number that they can call. But I think just spreading awareness about the services that we provide so that for yourself, if you ever need us, or if you come across someone that could use the service or that perhaps can financially support or, volunteer their time. And really what I also kind of want to say to that is, I think, we really want to focus on like intentionality, whether it's with the donations or with, volunteering our time, our ideas, even our criticism. Like we need the constructive feedback if we want to grow. And, inshallah, we really do have, these hopes of like, growing and really being a strong pillar in our community, or a stronger pillar. Yes. So I think the intentionality with, regardless of how we choose to contribute, I think we can each contribute in different ways and we all have a role to play, and just bringing that sort of intentionality and remembering that it's not just, $10 that you donated or an hour or two that you volunteered your time with or a post that you shared from Naseeha. Whatever your contribution is, it might sound, a little bit dramatic, but it really isn't. Like, you're playing such a huge role. You are literally saving lives. Like we said, like, the work that we do when it comes to crisis calls, we're saving lives. We're saving, people from harming themselves. We're providing support for, a single mom that doesn't know what to do. And she's, leaving an abusive, relationship. And this was the first line of contact for her. For a brother who's experiencing, Islamophobia at work, for, our youth, like our, young Muslim women that are, getting attacked or harassed because they're wearing a hijab, for a youth that are struggling with their identity, for children that are being neglected and sexually abused. Like you really are, providing and playing a huge role, regardless of your contribution, whether it's financial or not, in providing support and care for all those people, even if you don't know that that's what you're doing, because I understand the calls are anonymous and, like the work that we do, it's not concrete. You can't see it, but, it definitely is there. And the benefit and the impact is definitely there. So just, I guess wanted to share that as well.
So with that in mind, like what's for you personally, maybe, or one of the team members, like what's the one or two success stories where, you really feel that impact and, the community can be proud to really contribute and donate. And so what's a success story that you can share with us that really, hit you hard maybe?
I think that, there's I don't even know how to answer that, because I think that the way that I sort of see it is, regardless of something that is small or big, if we're able to help someone, if it's, maybe it's helping someone with like managing their symptoms of anxiety, or, maybe with, the next call is someone who is actively suicidal, right? Like there's, I think the adrenaline in those two sort of scenarios is so different as well. But regardless of like how you support as like a peer support counselor on the helpline, for example, um, helping, this person with their symptoms of anxiety, helping this person ground themselves and get the help that they need, to address those issues. At the end of the day, that is the success. Like it doesn't matter what the situation is. Just helping people is sort of like the success, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. In terms of memorable stories, like subhanAllah, there's just so many. I don't even know where to choose from. But sometimes it's, I remember there was a brother that we had a peer support counselor. There was a brother that was in a very toxic relationship for a few years, and he didn't know how to get out. And I think when we're talking about the cycle of abuse as well, it can be very challenging. And he called the helpline multiple times. He was a repeat caller, and it took a while, but eventually he was able to end that relationship. And then eventually he was able to work on himself, and he got married, and he called the helpline later to thank them for all the help that they provided him, because he was able to leave that toxic relationship. He was able to work on himself, get the help that he needed. And then alhamdulillah, he found a good partner, a suitable partner for him. And, he's in a happy sort of marriage. So whether it's something like that, or, again, like an active, crisis call where we're, supporting people and helping them, like, again, like I think the amount of pain that someone is in when they're, actively suicidal and they want to end their life. And, you have a peer support counselor that's able to talk them down and able to de-escalate and, again, really save their life. And, we wouldn't be able to do this work without the community support, without the financial support, the awareness, so alhamdulillah, like it really is amazing. I think the impact that we're making in the community. And, like I said, we have a lot of plans on growing, inshallah. And I'm excited to see where that would go and how we can be a stronger support for our community.
MashaAllah.
Jazakallah
Yes,
khair. We also have a comment here saying, mashallah, great job, Brother Kessler and Sister Marwa. I like the part you mentioned about openly discussing mental health day to day as a technique to normalize mental health convos in our society. So yes, Jazakallah khair for that comment. Sorry, Brother Kessler, you were going to say something?
Oh, that's it. I want to know, is there any other questions? Otherwise, I can start my one.
Yeah, go ahead. You can start your question, and
Actually,
then I'll ask one too after you're done.
Okay, wonderful. No, greatly said, Sister Marwa. So before even my question, I'd like to mention how I'd like to take that 1 minute to share how the Happy Strong Family was born and how the studio was born as well. So basically, I would like to start with every problems and issues, is a it can serve as a teaching moment, as a live teacher, like, rather than seeing it as a problem issue, you see it as an opportunity to grow, right? So that's what I try to, that outlook or that strategy I like to adopt in my life. So the Happy Strong Family was born because of me personally was going through or witnessed a lot of issues in the world, and also in family I saw a lot of problems, or in certain cases some breakups, etc. So so that really instigated me, not instigate, like influenced me actually, like what can I do to help build this happy healthy relationship between family members. And that's how I started thinking about it, and finally Happy Strong Family was born, focusing on programs and services that help build a stronger relationship among parents, children, husband, and all. We have parenting workshop, marriage workshop, etc. going on. So that's one. Second example I'll share, like how this studio was born. So during COVID, maybe you remember, around 2019, end of 2019 or beginning of 2020, everything was stopped in terms of, like, because of COVID, right? And masajid was stopped, everything was stopped, and we were thinking, like, what can we do? So alhamdulillah, that time I thought maybe we can take this opportunity to do something online, right? So that's the moment the studio was born. Like when everything stopped, no programs in the masjid, all the masjids are closed door. Alhamdulillah, at that time we took this opportunity to offer our programs and services online. That's how studio was born. So that's what I'm saying, like every moment you can
Mhm.
find opportunity to grow rather than seeing it problems. So what can I do and all this stuff, rather than getting depressed, see the other side, the window of opportunity, window of growth. So that's what I thought I should share with you. um, so the my I think question would be, in terms of growth, as you see, Naseeha Mental Health or Naseeha Helpline is growing a lot, mashallah, tabarakallah. So what are the areas you want to focus on in terms of whether your personal program services or collaboration with other masajid or organizations like, say, Happy Strong Family or other? So what are the areas we will be considered to make sure that you grow continuously and make an impact, or maybe achieve your vision and mission of your organization?
I think, one of the things is when we're talking about growth, I think being able to reach other pockets of Muslim communities that perhaps don't know about our services. So for example, for the calls, I mentioned that we get calls from around the world, but from Canada most of our calls are from within the GTA. So I think trying to really just increase our the community's awareness, nationwide. We do get calls from across the nation, but most of them are from within the GTA. So I think trying to grow on that scale where we can reach the people that need it the most. If you're living in northern parts, or northern provinces, and perhaps you're already isolated from like a larger Muslim community in the first place. So I think being able to reach the people that need it the most, that maybe don't have access to a professional that will understand them, that has whether it's like the ethnic background or the religious background, or that sort of perspective, so that cultural sort of sensitivity and competency. So I think that the organization is hoping to grow and expand in that sense. And then the other part of it, I think, is also just the collaborations with other organizations. And alhamdulillah, mashallah, we definitely collaborate with a lot of different organizations. And I know that we want to continue doing that, including the masajid, because the masajid are, for a lot of, members of our community, they go to their masjid first, right? And, subhanAllah, sometimes it's a lot for that masjid to be able to kind of take on. So I think, collaborating with masajid and leaders and our community members is another sort of area of focus that we're looking at. And for those viewers that are watching, if that's something that you're interested in, or if you can facilitate that, or want to be a part of that, then it's a great time to volunteer for that as well. And then I think the other area is research. So more sort of like empirical research that's being that we can conduct to better understand our community and what the needs are and what the gaps are, so that we can also fulfill that. And I think, to your point too, when we have a family member that's really struggling with their mental health, or has perhaps a mental health disorder, how do we support them? I think that there's still a lot of, I think our organization recognizes that there's gaps in our community where we don't know where to go to get that culturally relevant sort of support. So I think those are some of the bigger themes in terms of where the organization and how the organization is trying to grow. And like I said, we're really welcoming volunteers in that sense.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Sister Marwa. So, Brother Kashif, you have questions?
Yes, so just one I'll display here on the screen. Sorry, you guys are not here. Okay. So this series we're doing is we're focusing on local charities that are and organizations that are doing work in the local communities here at Canada. So we're halfway through it now, mashallah. We had Smile Canada on, so you can catch that recording. Today we have Naseeha. Next week, Nisa Helpline, and then we'll close off the Ramadan series with Said Mirza from National Zakat Foundation. So alhamdulillah, just a public service announcement, I guess. Like, as we mentioned a few slides, there is our hearts are bleeding with what's going on overseas and all the humanitarian efforts that are required overseas. But let's not also lose sight of what's needed in Canada, in our local communities. And, I don't want to get into the fiqh of zakat, what's zakat eligible, what's not zakat eligible, but, they do say that zakat starts inward and then you move outwards, right, from your family to your local communities, then international. So let's not forget our local communities, because I do believe it's all interconnected, right? I have no doubt that eventually someone that's getting help through Naseeha Helpline, there will be someone that becomes a huge advocate for what's going on overseas and gives back. So it's all interconnected. So let's not lose sight because of what's going on locally also, and help our organizations that are, because they don't have the marketing dollars that some of the big international relief organizations have to build that awareness. Was our responsibility as a community to help them, support them, and build that awareness, inshallah. So I just wanted to make that. And with that in mind, we were calling this series sort of community heroes, because these are organizations that are working on our behalf as heroes. So I just wanted to know about the team at Naseeha. Like, tell us a little bit, like, without getting specific, without people, but in just in general terms, like, it can't be easy doing this work at all with some of the stories that they must hear. But what do you have to say to the team members at Naseeha and about them?
Yeah, and I appreciate that. I think that Nasiha wouldn't be what it is if it wasn't for our team of dedicated staff, dedicated volunteers, people who really believe in the work that they do. And we are a non-for-profit charity, so unfortunately, sometimes when we're looking at compensation and so on, it's I think the work that we do and how meaningful it is and how challenging it is, sometimes the compensation doesn't align yet, inshallah, in the future, but yet. But I think that, it really speaks to the dedication. We have a lot of loyal and dedicated staff that really put their, all their effort, energy, and, literal tears sometimes too, in a lot of the work that we do, because it's definitely not easy. So, we wouldn't be where we're at. And we wouldn't be able to support the community in the way that we are, mashallah, already supporting the community if it wasn't for our staff and our team and our leadership. Our previous CEO was Yassine Puna. Right now we have Brother Zaid, who was the previous CEO to Islamic Relief, mashallah. So alhamdulillah, we have a great staff, great volunteers. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala really help our organization grow so that we're able to provide that support and be a pillar to the Muslim community and be a beacon to the Muslim community, inshallah, and to others as well. I think our goal, our shared sort of goal, is to alleviate the suffering and really hold space and demonstrate empathy and compassion to people, and kindness, and help, Brother Kashif, to your point, help empower people. We don't know, like, the ways in which we support these callers. We don't know where they will go in the trajectory of their lives. But if we're able to support them and take them to help them get into a better space in their life, then, we're empowering them, right? And Allahu alam what that person's potential will be, and their contribution to society. And I think even like the community's sort of, whichever way the community chooses to contribute, whether it's financially or as a volunteer or spreading awareness and so on, again, like, everybody's playing a role in in that, and in our future, in our community's future, in our youth's future as well, right? So mashallah, it's amazing. And I think, just if I can also sort of add that, for the community, like, we talked about, like, that role, you really do play an active role in all of these stories, subhanallah, even if you don't know what they necessarily are or where they lead. But then also on the other side, just to really let the community know that, we're here for you. We have our trained professionals, alhamdulillah, on the phone. We are now 24/7. And we really do want to be able to support our community. Everybody deserves to have a safe space and to be heard and, to be understood. And you're not alone. We are here for you.
Excellent. Thank you, Sister Marwa. So I have one more question. Sorry. So every whatever aspects of life or sector you may consider, it has two dimension, two sides. One is proactive, that is reactive, right? So, for example, in car, you have proactively deal with driving by taking driving lessons to prevent any potential accidents, right? Not necessarily that you're gonna go into accident, but you take this proactive approach, a seatbelt approach, right? And then if accident happens, then you go to people who are involved to resolve the issue. So from your end, so how do you or are you covering, or how are you covering this proactive and reactive side of addressing the whole mental health domain? Like, you are covering the reactive when things happen, and also you're providing workshops so that doesn't happen. But in terms of proactive, what I mean is, like, more like before things happen, how are you like encouraging the community, the members, whether it's a Muslim or non-Muslim, because this is a whole thing is a common, is a human issue, right?
Mhm.
Mental, so how, and we see there's a deprivation of this mental health overall across the board, but it's a Muslim believers and non-believers, doesn't matter. So from human perspective, how are you encouraging the whole spectrum of mental health to prosper, to get more bright and more stronger, more loving, caring, enlightening, empathetic? How are we really bringing these human values more and more through your programs and workshops? Be a proactive and reactive model.
Yeah, and I think that the different sort of services and the resources that we provide, some of them, like you said, they do fall under that domain of like being reactive. So, for example, when God forbid there is a tragedy in the community, and we have like our critical sort of response team that's sent out. So that might be a little bit more reactive in that sense. Or sometimes we have callers that call in after something happened and so on, and they're looking for support. So I think in a sense that can be kind of grouped under reactive care. When we're talking about proactive, I mean, I mentioned that we are trying to get more into the sort of research aspect of things as well. And I think that, where that will go, inshallah, will address a lot of the sort of kind of fall under the proactive sort of domain in terms of being able to better support our community and, really help us nurture and raise, healthy families, healthy children, and so on. And then it's sort of that concept inward, outward, where, if we work on ourselves and our families and so on, then we can, it just gets bigger and bigger, like our impact. So I think that there's that research sort of aspect that is there. In terms of, other sort of resources as well. Like I think a lot of our workshops are, some of them are reactive and some of them are also, proactive in the sense that we have a program, I believe it's called Elevate, and it's for young girls. And, it really works on fostering resilience and, confidence and self-esteem and exploring, self-image sort of issues. So I think when we really target, especially our early, like our younger, generation, the youth and children and so on, we're able to, if we're able to invest in them, right? Like they're the future. I feel like I'm always saying that, like, our kids and our youth are literally the future. And, the more we're able to invest in them, then we're investing in our future and inshallah in a better future for everyone, right? Because also then we have more people that are more aware. They're able to self-reflect. They're able to be compassionate with themselves and other people. And I think that there's tremendous, like a domino effect when it comes to the good that can come out of that. So I think a lot of our workshops do sort of can provide that and do provide that. And, as we continue to grow and as we continue to understand what our community needs, then we'll be in a better position to continue to do that. And part of that, again, is to increase the awareness of Naseeha, but also to be able to support Naseeha and help us grow as an organization so that we can invest more in the community, inshallah.
Definitely. I look forward to a lot of opportunities as well. So, Kashifa, is it something that we're okay? Cool. So, thank you very much, viewers. Really appreciate to have Sister Marwa and Brother Kashif, and like to thank you, viewers, to stay with us, and hopefully you are enjoying these sessions and getting benefits from all the life lessons and words of wisdom from Sister Marwa and others. I'd like to thank you, and I'd like to thank Masjid Darul Iman again for giving us tremendous support to continue this beneficial podcast. So until next podcast, I'd like to give you salam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu, and make dua for us. Barakallahu feekum. Assalamu alaikum.
Jazakallah khairan. Thank you, brother.